The last couple of seasons, NASCAR has run the preseason Busch Clash at the LA Coliseum in Los Angeles. But before that, it was tradition to kick off the NASCAR season and speed weeks with the Busch Clash at Daytona. Eligibility to get in and the format of the race itself have changed several times over the years. And I think the race just got to a point where it was starting to become a waste of money for the teams, being at Daytona with such a high risk of getting caught in a wreck. And I think this race in 2020 was the last straw for the teams in NASCAR, because this race was a legit demolition derby, and it was just truly a battle of who was going to survive to make it to the checkered flag. Some people out there label this race as the Busch Crash because of how big of a joke it was. And to give you a little idea of what's to come, out of the 18 starters in this one, only 6 cars would actually see the checkered flag, and 5 of them were on the lead lap. And this is actually a real shame, because the teams and manufacturers had some interesting strategy calls that made this race very exciting before all hell would break loose. The format for this one was 75 laps divided into 2 segments, the first segment being 25 laps, and then a second 50 lap segment to go to the checkered flag. The criteria to be in this race was drivers who won a Busch Pole Award in the 2019 NASCAR Cup Series season, former Busch Clash winners, former Daytona 500 winners, and former Daytona 500 pole winners, as well as drivers who competed in the 2019 NASCAR playoffs. And all drivers must have competed in every single race throughout the 2019 season. Ryan Newman was on pole, and Brad Keselowski was on the outside of the front row to bring the field to green. Now, I know what I said about this race being a demolition derby, but the first segment of this race went all 25 laps without incident, as by lap 5, the entire field was in a single file train along the outside wall running the top of the racetrack already. Eric Almirola was the only odd man out on the bottom by himself, but he would fall right to the back and just get in line with everybody else. Even though this is an exhibition race, the drivers are trying to be respectful and patient and just ride it out to the end of the segment, as everyone knew that that competition caution was going to come at lap 25. Martin Truex Jr. was lucky enough to put himself in position to be in front of this pack leading the way out front, but unfortunately that led to some debris on the grill of his car, which caused it to start overheating, so down the back straightaway he literally had to pull over and let the field through on the outside in hopes of getting in line behind somebody else, preferably without going all the way to the back, as you could see how much debris was on his grill as he was getting past. This would put Brad Keselowski in the lead of the race, as he benefited from Truex's misfortunes. The rest of the segment would be pretty uneventful until we actually reached lap 25. This created some interesting strategy calls here, because the caution flag would come out once the field completed lap 25. But what several teams and drivers elected to do was hit pit road immediately on lap 25 before getting to the start finish line, resulting in the caution coming out when they were all on pit road. This allowed these teams to get their 4 tires in fuel now rather than under the caution flag, which all the drivers that never stopped would have to do. This caused these drivers to leapfrog all those drivers that had to come down under yellow, and it was the best strategy for good track position. The only issue was a lot of these guys had that same idea. The strategy wouldn't stop there though, as with 1 to go before the green flag, all the Chevrolet teams elected to come down pit road and top up on fuel, as manufacturers like to stick together despite being on different teams. But when everything was said and done, Brad Keselowski, who was leading before all of this, resumed the lead of the race and would lead the field back to the green flag. As we begin this final stage, you know the intensity is going to ramp up, and there's going to be a lot less give and take as the laps wind down. Even in this segment, it did not take them very long to get in a single file train riding the outside wall. The thought process behind it this time was to ride it out until you had to make a pit stop to top up on fuel. At least that's what the Fords and the Toyotas were planning. But those Chevrolets that came in under that yellow to top up on fuel had other plans. They were going to try to save fuel and stretch this one all the way to the end. And this actually made things extremely interesting, as there's two significant strategies that were about to play out here, and you didn't know which one was going to be the best. And things would start to become extremely interesting on lap 47 when the Ford Joe Gibbs Toyotas, along with Ryan Blaney's Ford, were the first to come down pit road to top up on fuel. These guys would end up losing a drafting partner here though, with Eric Jones sliding through his pit box. And because the stop is supposed to be a fuel-only stop, the team was not prepared with tires, so they had to scramble to get some tires ready so they could make a 4-tire change here and send Eric on his way. This would end up costing him a lap to the leaders. And one would think put an end to his day. The very next lap, the remaining Fords that were on the racetrack all came down for their pit stop to top up on fuel, handing control of the race to those 7 Chevrolets and randomly Joey Logano. The problem was that there was still quite a few laps left, and the pace that the Chevys were running due to their fuel save was extremely slow, while the Toyotas and the Fords merged together, creating a good sized drafting pack, with them also not being concerned for fuel. So these guys were going full throttle wide open the entire time and were catching the front pack at a very extreme rate, as they had 30 seconds to make up before the conclusion of the race. And at the conclusion of lap 62, those guys have fully closed the gap and have created one big pack at the front again. And now you could probably guess where this one is about to go. With under 10 laps to go, the field was racing very hard 2 and 3 wide, but they wouldn't be able to sustain that level of aggression. Joey Logano trying desperately to block Kyle Busch, couldn't do it, ended up making contact, sending Kyle Busch spinning, which took out both Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski, and almost their third Team Penske teammate Ryan Blaney as well. Joey Logano was fortunate enough to continue here, but Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch were done.
So here's a big push coming from teammate Denny Hamlin. Kyle's got a huge run, gets right to the rear bumper of Joey Logano, and you can see as he pops out, I mean, I don't know if the air turned Joey a little bit or they made contact first.
This yellow essentially wiped out any strategy, as most of the Chevys came down pit road here to top up on fuel, so everyone was good to go to the end. Some other guys also elected to come get some fresh tires here. And also Eric Jones, who was the only car 1 lap down, was able to get the free pass here, which is very important.
Chris Gabart, the crew chief, would rather walk to victory lane than the care center. Oh! Ryan Newman came down and everybody behind piles up.
I saw a lot of rear tire spin on that restart. I think a lot of guys were struggling with grip and they just started losing control.
Well, as you can see there, the restart was pretty messy. Some guys who stayed out there were not expecting the tires to spin when they hit the gas for the green flag, as that's not something that normally happens at a super speedway. This caught William Byron and Ryan Newman completely off guard, and it ended up taking out pretty much the whole field here. But thankfully these guys were going so slow that all the cars had relatively minor damage here.
Maybe it could have been contact. Could have been contact from the 24 and that nose on that Camaro of William Byron as he gets to the rear bumper of Ryan Newman.
And it looked like he had been hit by the 4 of Kevin Harvick, which may have sent him into Newman.
Now he was already, you could see William Byron was already out of shape as Kevin Harvick made contact with the 24.
Despite all the carnage here in wrecked race cars, only Byron, Bowman, and Truex did not continue here. Truex's team in particular didn't even really try. Byron and Bowman's team did, but they ended up just calling it a day, as they were still on pit road when the green flag came back out.
Green-white checker. If the leader takes the white flag under green, the next flag, be it yellow or checker, will end the race.
We know green-white checkered finishes are a recipe for disaster at super speedways, but all these guys have to do is just make it back around to see the white flag, and the next flag will end the race, whether it's a caution or they come around to the checkered. But by the time they got to the back straightaway, it became pretty apparent that chances were slim to none that these guys were going to make it back around. As coming off turn number 2, Denny Hamlin, who was trying desperately to hold the lead, knew he had an issue as he suffered damage on that right rear quarter panel in the first incident with Joey Logano and Kyle Busch, which caused a slow leak in his right rear tire. And despite him trying to hold on desperately, as soon as he got to turn number 3, he would lose the back end of that car and collect several drivers here, as a lot of these guys have been involved in their second or third accident to this point, which is pretty wild.
Huge push coming from Clint Bowyer and Joey Logano to the rear bumper of Chase Elliott. Sends the 11, Denny Hamlin, into turn 3. Watch this car just go around. You know that that's a tire that went down, had to be.
Alright, so now we've lost over half the field. We only have 7 cars left. Do you think they'd be done wrecking yet? One would think, as we make another attempt at a green-white checkered finish here. But with so few cars still on the racetrack, this skyrocketed every driver's hopes that was still on the racetrack that they had a legitimate shot to win this race still, especially with the majority of their competition in the garage area. But once again, as soon as they made it to turn number 3, all hell would break loose, as Kyle Larson was trying desperately to block Chase Elliott, putting them both into the outside wall. Almost a similar situation of what happened with Joey Logano and Kyle Busch earlier in the race. This one would take Chase Elliott out of the race for good, while Kyle Larson and Eric Jones, who were also involved in this one as well, would come down pit road to make more repairs to their car, and they would continue on, and Denny Hamlin, who was 2 laps down, manages to get one back here, and he's the only car out there that's not on the lead lap.
Larson does a good job blocking him. Now Larson realizes he's going to go to the inside. This is almost similar to what happened between Joey Logano and Kyle Busch earlier. He tried to go to the inside. They just make contact and they both go around.
So now that we only have 6 cars left, can we finish it off this time? As these guys take the green flag here, every single driver had a great shot to take the win here, except for Denny Hamlin, who was still 1 lap down. However, he can end up helping his teammate Eric Jones, who would arguably need all the help that he can get, as he was in the most beat up car that was left in this race. And quite honestly, as soon as this green flag dropped, I don't think anyone would think Eric Jones had a shot at winning this one with how severely caved in and bent his hood was, as his car was anything but aerodynamic at this point. Austin Dillon's car is still in pretty good shape compared to all the cars around him, as Kyle Larson, Clint Bowyer, Ryan Newman, Eric Jones, and Denny Hamlin all had some pretty bad damage to their cars. But despite leading the restart, Dillon was pretty much hung out to dry right away, but his lack of damage allowed him to navigate back through the field relatively quickly, and he was up to 2nd when the white flag came out. No one was willing to work together here, and everyone was just trying to get as big a run as they can so they could slingshot past and try to take the lead. But further back, Denny Hamlin was able to hook bumpers with Eric Jones, and that's all it would take to rocket to the front on the last lap of the race. Regardless of how destroyed both these cars are, this shows you just how strong the draft really truly is.
He's going to push his teammate to the win.
Eric Jones is going to win the Busch Clash with a car that's ready for the dumpster.
Eric Jones, with the help of his teammate Denny Hamlin, both of them in destroyed race cars, linked up together and were able to win for Joe Gibbs Racing. What a finish. It's absolutely incredible that a car that demolished would be able to win a race at Daytona, but that's exactly what happened in the 2020 Busch Clash. And let's not forget here the mistake that Eric Jones made earlier in the race on making a green flag pit stop that put him 1 lap down. Under 10 laps to go, he was a lap down in this race, got his lap back when the first crash happened, and then ended up getting caught in a few wrecks himself, but was still able to come back to secure the victory. Truly unbelievable. And now you probably have a little insight of why they no longer do the Busch Clash at Daytona. Anyway, that's gonna do it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this one. This race was comical, but it was definitely a cool one that I wanted to revisit, despite just being an exhibition race. Subscribe to my channel if you're into NASCAR, IndyCar, and other motorsports. And I hope to see you guys in my next video. That's all for now. Take care, everybody.